Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and thank you for tuning in to Canal Algérie's Nightly News on February the 15th. Here are the major stories. The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, receives the head of the External Affairs Commission at the Turkish Grand National Assembly, Fuad Oktay. The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, chairs a meeting devoted to the preparations related to the 7th Summit of Heads of State and Government of gas exporting countries. In the Middle East, Zionist aggressions persist in Gaza and 1.5 million Palestinians in Rafah are left with nowhere to go while the threat of ground military attacks looms over Rafah. Another story we're covering tonight, the various corruption scandals of the Moroccan regime and its ties with international criminal networks. Welcome again. We begin with tonight's major story where the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, received on Thursday the President of the Foreign Affairs Commission at the Grand National Assembly of the Republic of Turkey, Fuad Oktay. The audience occurred in the presence of the Principal Private Secretary of the Presidency of the Republic, Boualem, and the President of the External Affairs Cooperation and Community Commission of the People's National Assembly, Rabah Boutilja. Let's listen now to the President of the External Affairs Commission of the Grand National Assembly of the Republic of Turkey.
We had an important discussion with President Abdelmajid Tebboune. We represent the External Foreign Affairs Commission at the Turkish Parliament. We conveyed the greetings of our President to the Head of State Abdelmajid Tebboune. We reviewed issues of common interest. There have been agreements. As part of the two presidents' visits, we have reached the level of businessmen and civil society in implementing these agreements. The investment volume amounting to $6 billion denote the importance of the economic aspects. A similar amount also in the field of commercial exchange. We endeavor to reach $10 billion in the future in all fields. Partnership is being consolidated as well. Regarding Gaza, a common issue, we discussed ways of brokering ceasefire. There have been messages between the two presidents relating to that. We back Algeria as a non-permanent member at the UN Security Council. We work together to find a settlement to end genocide, ensure the flow of humanitarian aid and implement the decisions taken by the International Court of Justice, notably denouncing the perpetrators, above all Netanyahu. We want a lasting and peaceful settlement, recognizing Palestine as an independent state with Al-Quds as its capital.
In another presidential activity, the President of the Republic chaired on Thursday a meeting devoted to the preparations related to the 7th Summit of the Heads of State and Government of gas exporting countries. Held today in Constantine was the 50th meeting of the Executive Committee of the Parliamentary Union of State Members of the Islamic Cooperation Organization. The work session was presided over by the President of the National People's Assembly, Brahim Boughali, during which she addressed a keynote speech indicating Algeria's position regarding the situation in occupied Palestine. Let's get more from Melissa Kebash.
The activities of the 50th meeting of the Executive Committee held in Constantine Province didn't fail to mention the current situation and genocide occurring in the occupied territories of Gaza. The event also witnessed the participation of the Permanent Commission of Economic and Environmental Affairs of the Union of Councils of State Members of the Islamic Cooperation.
The situation is catastrophic. The Palestinian people are deprived from basic necessities such as water, food, medicine, and shelter. The situation in Palestine is dangerous due to brutal ongoing aggressions committed by the Zionist entity against the Gaza Strip and the entire occupied territories.
The two-day meeting will allow the participants to discuss main questions and current challenges.
The Council is an important organization. It always brought support to the Palestinian cause as well as questions of common interest for Muslim countries. The Council is focusing on a number of challenges, including the climate change and, of course, the key cause for all Muslim nations, the Palestinian question and the war crimes committed in Gaza. The goal of this meeting is to convey the messages of our peoples, wishing them stability and prosperity.
This working session was marked by the election of two vice presidents, one stemming from the African group while the other one hailing from the Asian group, in accordance with the decisions and recommendations of the 17th Conference of the Union held in Algiers, January 2023.
In a separate development, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, delivered a speech during the proceedings of the 44th Ordinary Session of the African Union's Executive Council on the mechanisms of the participation of the African Union in G20. He called on today in Addis Ababa for an active participation of the AU in G20, commending the efforts of those who contributed to the adhesion of this continental organization to this grouping, which is considered as a gain that must be valued and a step forward to take advantage of our collective efforts aiming at repairing the historical injustice and to put an end to the long-term marginalization of the continent at the level of the different international organizations, be they political, security, economic, or social. Minister Attaf noted that the delegation further supports the approach suggestion the creation of the Executive Council, which is inspired by the Decision 845 of the Conferences of Heads of State and Government. Let's have a listen now to our Foreign Minister, Ahmed Attaf.
The rotating president, backed by the head of the Commission, endeavored to represent our organization in the G20 meetings at the level of the summit. This move is the most efficient to make the voice of our continent heard. We hail the efforts being made for the adhesion of the African Union to the G20, deem it as an asset to our common efforts to repair a historic injustice and the marginalization of our continent by the world institutions, be they political, security, economic, or social.
In a related context, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, held on Thursday in Addis Ababa on the sidelines of the second day of the proceedings of the 44th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union, a set of bilateral meetings. Minister Attaf held talks with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of the Republic of Benin, Olusegun Ajadi Bakari. The meeting allowed for the examination of means and ways to consolidate the bilateral relations between both countries and to strengthen the consultations of the development of the political and security situation in the South Sahara region, notably in regard to the contribution of the promotion of the peaceful solutions in different conflicts and crises. Similarly, Minister Attaf held bilateral talks with the special envoy of the Chinese government in charge of African affairs, Liu Yuqi. Both parties discussed means and ways to further nourish the friendly relations between Algeria and China in the framework of the follow-up of the decisions and results of the state visit of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, to the People's Republic of China in July 2023. The Foreign Minister Attaf also held talks with his Portuguese counterpart, João Gomes Cravinho. This meeting was devoted to the examination of ways and means to reinforce partnership and cooperation relations between Algeria and Portugal in light of the conclusions of the state visit of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, in May 2023 to the Portuguese Republic, and the preparations of the upcoming session of the high-level Algerian-Portuguese meeting during the second semester of this year. Minister Attaf also held talks with the State Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Latvia, Andrej Bilkovic. The meeting discussed the priorities and the objectives of the candidacy of the Republic of Latvia to a non-permanent seat at the Security Council for the year 2026-2027, for the first time in its history. Attaf also held talks with his counterpart of the Republic of Madagascar, Rasata Ravarava Vitavica, as well. In separate news, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, received on Thursday a phone call from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Hossein Amir Abdul Haid. These talks revolved around the evolution of the persistent genocide on the brotherly Palestinian people in Gaza Strip, the mobilization diplomatic efforts deployed by Algeria in favor of the Palestinian cause at the level of the UN Security Council. Both parties discussed means to nourish bilateral relations and the prospects of the preparations of the upcoming high-level bilateral meetings. The Zionist occupation army continues its bombing of the Gaza and other Palestinian territories. Not a day goes by without innocent civilians being martyred. Voices continue to rise around the world to condemn this genocide and to demand an immediate ceasefire to allow access of humanitarian aid. Ines Killu has this assessment of the situation.
During 131 days of bombardment on the Gaza Strip, there is still no solution in the offing to stop the war machine unleashed by the Zionist army since October 7th. The situation has become more and more unbearable for innocent civilians who see their loved ones falling into martyrdom. At the humanitarian level, the situation is very catastrophic. The Gazan population and the inhabitants of various other regions are starving and cannot find food and water in particular. In terms of health, hospitals are still under siege and lack everything. This is an example of Nasser Khan Younis Hospital, which continues to operate under bombardment and with a blatant shortage of medicines and oxygen. Health sources reported the death of many patients and doctors as a result of the Zionist army's attack on the hospital yard, urging all people who took refuge in it to leave it and head towards the Rafah camp, where more than 1.5 million Palestinians live in extremely difficult conditions and where the threat of a ground military attack is imminent. The Palestinians are catching their breath and all the eyes of the world are turning to this camp. The international community reiterated its call for a humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The UN Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide stressed the need to ensure that humanitarian aid reaches those most in need. For his part, United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres put the emphasis on the necessity of an immediate ceasefire for humanitarian reasons in Gaza. Moreover, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa reaffirmed his country's commitment to help secure a ceasefire and a possible two-state solution between Palestine and the Zionist entity. In the same context, China's permanent representative to the United Nations added the most urgent need is ceasefire in Gaza and take responsible measures to prevent further regional escalation. Australia, Canada and New Zealand called for an urgent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip in a joint statement by their Prime Minister. As a reminder, the Arab countries in the United Nations announced on Wednesday that they are preparing to submit a draft resolution to the Security Council calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, stressing that this draft also calls for providing humanitarian relief to the population.
The Sahrawis are enduring once again displacement campaigns orchestrated by the Moroccan occupier. A similar strategy adopted by the Zionist entity in the occupied territories of Gaza aimed at marginalizing both the Sahrawi people and the Palestinian people. Insights with Melissa Kabash.
The Moroccan occupier has been launching displacement campaigns over the past few days in the occupied territories of Al-Ayoun, precisely the region of Al-Marijat, causing severe psychological repercussions on its inhabitants. Violent practices are being carried out by the occupying Moroccan authorities as it continues to violate human rights as well as international convention, same practices committed by the Zionist forces.
The attacks are underway. They are destroying and burning our homes. We call on world organizations and human rights protectors to face these heinous crimes.
Provocative acts aim at pressuring the inhabitants to leave their homes so they can take the Sahrawi lands and grant them to foreign investors alongside the Zionist entity.
These zones were targeted by the occupation Moroccan forces as houses were demolished and burnt, leaving the inhabitant in terror. We call on the international organizations to support the Sahrawi people and put an end to their suffering that goes back to 1975. Over the past few years, the Moroccan occupier kept violating international laws in the occupied territories of Western Sahara, in particular Article 53 aimed at protecting civilians and their properties during wartime.
A well-worked-out strategy by the occupier aimed at marginalizing the Sahrawi people, a situation that requires a strong condemnation by the international community.
Morocco is criticized for scandals and rampant corruption, contrary to the illusion of decency carefully maintained over the past years. New revelations are threatening the current regime, sued by several world organizations, plunging the political mechanism into an unprecedented crisis. Ines Killu has this report for us.
The reign of Mohammed VI is currently the spotlighted, criticized for its scandals and rampant corruption, contrary to the illusion of decency that was carefully maintained once Hassan II was in power. The current authority does not even pretend to scandals and international connections. The criminal networks have brought the Makhzen regime into an unprecedented crisis. Recent scandals, from the Pegasus spy program to the Morocco Gate case, a major corruption case involving members of the European Parliament, have jolted the Makhzen regime, and the Belgian judiciary body has finally responded by issuing international arrest warrants against senior Moroccan officials, including the Prime Minister Aziz Akhnouch and the Minister of Foreign Affairs Nasser Bourita. Sprawling networks of corruption, fueled by orders coming directly from different power segments, have been exposed, leading to major diplomatic judicial repercussions. As corruption and criminal links become increasingly exposed, the Mohammed VI regime looks more and more like a relic of bygone era. Key figures such as Abdelrahim Atmoun, the Moroccan ambassador to Poland, and the head of the General Directorate of Studies and Documentation have been targeted by international sanctions and arrest warrants.
Sport now. Steve was trounced by MC El Bayad with 3-0 in the opening game of the 17th week of the National Football Championship. Following this victory, MC El Bayad jumps temporarily to the 8th rank with 24 points.
هل يسجلها فعلا يحط الكرة في الشباك.
With football, we end tonight's bulletin. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and enjoy your weekend.